The day I came home early was meant to be a turning point. I was finally going to make time for Patty, to show her that even with my hectic schedule as a lawyer, she still mattered. For months, work had consumed me, and I knew it had taken a toll on us. But that evening, I had a plan. I stopped by her favorite Thai place on my way home, picked up an order of green curry and spring rolls, and even grabbed a bottle of her favorite white wine. By the time I arrived, the house was quiet, the way it usually was when Patty wasn't around. I set everything up on the dining table, complete with candles and our good plates, the ones we never used because we were always too busy. When I heard the front door unlock, my heart raced with anticipation. Patty stepped in, her face lit up by the glow from her phone. She barely glanced at me as she slipped off her shoes and set her bag down by the door. "Hey," she mumbled, not looking up. I didn't waste a second. I walked over to her and wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close. "I've missed you," I said, pressing a kiss to her temple. She tensed slightly before patting my shoulder awkwardly, like I was a stranger she didn't know how to interact with. "What's all this?" she asked, glancing over at the table as I pulled away. "I wanted to surprise you. Dinner. Just us. I don't want to wait any longer, Patty. I need you now." The words sounded better in my head, but they were true. I meant them. I wanted us to fix whatever had gone wrong, to find our way back to what we used to be. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's sweet, Stan. But I'm exhausted. I had a long day, and I really need to lie down." She pulled away completely, picking up her bag and heading toward the bedroom. I stood there, staring at the table I had set so carefully, the candles flickering as if mocking my effort. After a moment, I followed her down the hallway. I didn't want to push her, but I couldn't just let this moment slip by without trying again. When I reached the bedroom door, I saw it was slightly ajar, and I could hear her moving around inside. "Patty, can we just," I started, but the words caught in my throat. Through the gap in the door, I saw her slipping off her dress. My breath hitched as I noticed something strange. There was nothing underneath it. No bra, no panties. Just bare skin. That wasn't normal for Patty. She wasn't the type to forego underwear, especially not when coming home from a long day. My chest tightened as a million questions flooded my mind. Why? I stood frozen in place, unable to tear my eyes away. She didn't notice me, busying herself with changing into pajamas. I felt like an intruder in my own home, a voyeur catching a glimpse of a truth I wasn't ready to confront. My throat felt dry, and my voice abandoned me entirely. I backed away from the door as silently as I could, my thoughts racing. What did this mean? Was I reading too much into it? Was there an explanation I wasn't considering? I didn't know what to think. All I knew was that something was wrong. The perfect evening I had envisioned was crumbling before my eyes, and I didn't even have the strength to ask why. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene in my head. Patty's bare skin under that dress. The way she'd brushed me off so easily, like I wasn't even worth her time. I wanted to believe it was nothing. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew something was off. The feeling was like a pebble in my shoe, small but impossible to ignore. The next morning, I left for work early, hoping the distractions of the office would drown out my thoughts. It worked for a while. The constant buzz of meetings, contracts, and clients filled my day. But when I returned home that evening, the unease was waiting for me, sharper than ever. I decided I couldn't leave it alone. If there was nothing to worry about, fine. But I needed to know for sure. Started with small things. A week after that strange night, I noticed a charge on our joint account for a hotel downtown. At first, I thought I'd misread it. Patty rarely spent money without letting me know, and a hotel? That didn't make sense. "Hey," I said casually over dinner that night, trying to sound unconcerned. "Did you stay at the Marriott last week? There's a charge here." Patty barely looked up from her plate. Oh yeah, she said quickly. I was out shopping and got caught in the rain. I needed to freshen up before meeting Sarah for dinner. You know how I hate being all wet and messy. Her tone was light, her explanation simple. But something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. Patty was meticulous with money. She hated frivolous spending and would have gone home to change before wasting money on a hotel room. I let it go, but the pebble in my shoe felt more like a rock now. The next clue came a few days later. Patty had always loved shopping, but now it seemed to be her main activity. She was constantly coming and going, talking about sales and deals, yet she never seemed to have anything new to show for it. That Friday, she announced she was heading out again. I'm meeting Rachel at the outlet mall, she said, grabbing her purse. I nodded but didn't reply. Instead, I waited until I heard her car pull out of the driveway before checking the trunk. The sight inside made my stomach twist. It was filled with shopping bags, designer ones, but they were all empty. Why would she keep empty bags in her trunk? Unless... No. I wasn't ready to finish that thought. I started paying closer attention to her behavior. The more I watched, the more things didn't add up. She was glued to her phone now, texting at all hours, even late at night. When I asked her who she was talking to, she gave vague answers. Just Sarah, just Rachel. Always just someone. I couldn't stop the spiral. My mind was a mess of theories and half-baked suspicions. Was she really shopping all those times? What about the hotel charge? And those empty bags in her trunk? What was she hiding? I didn't want to believe she was cheating. I wanted to trust her. But the evidence was piling up, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. That's when I decided to take the next step. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them from Patty. Not yet. If she was lying to me, I wouldn't even know what to believe. I needed someone who could find the truth for me. I called a private detective. The private detective, Mark, came highly recommended. He was a no-nonsense guy, gruff and methodical, with years of experience uncovering secrets that people thought they'd buried forever. When I explained my situation to him, he didn't blink. Stan, I'll tell you this up front. If there's something to find, I'll find it. But you need to be prepared for whatever that might be. I nodded, though the knot in my stomach tightened. I just need to know the truth. Mark got to work immediately. He tailed Patty during her outings, tracking her movements, photographing her interactions, and documenting every detail. The waiting was agony. Every day that passed felt like an eternity, each hour filled with doubt and the faint hope that I was wrong. But I wasn't. A week later, Mark called me into his office. You might want to sit down, he said, sliding a folder across the desk. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photographs, receipts, and logs of Patty's activities. There was no room for interpretation. No excuses she could make that would erase the truth. The first photo was of her at a downtown hotel, standing outside the entrance with a man. He was tall, muscular, with a cocky smile that made my blood boil. The next photo was worse. The two of them holding hands as they entered the lobby together. His name's Gareth, Mark said, leaning back in his chair. Personal trainer at the gym she's been going to. They've been meeting up regularly for weeks. Maybe months. I flipped through more photos. Patty and Gareth sharing dinner at an upscale restaurant, laughing over glasses of wine. A receipt stapled to one of the pages confirmed it. 2 entrees, 2 wines, all paid for with my credit card. Then there were the hotel stays. Mark had tracked her movements, and it was clear. The shopping trips were a cover for her time with Gareth. She'd even gone as far as hiding empty shopping bags in the trunk of her car, a prop for her lies. She's careful, Mark said. Keeps things discreet. But the pattern is clear. She's been using your money to fund the whole thing. My chest tightened as I closed the folder. The proof was right there in front of me, and yet I couldn't believe it. Or maybe I just didn't want to. She's financing their affair with my money, I muttered, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Mark nodded grimly. That's the long and short of it. I sat in my car after leaving Mark's office, staring blankly at the steering wheel. A storm of emotions churned inside me: anger, hurt, betrayal, disbelief. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do anything that would release the pressure building in my chest. But I didn't. Instead, I drove home in silence, the folder sitting heavy on the passenger seat. When I walked through the door that evening, Patty was in the kitchen, humming softly as she chopped vegetables for dinner. She looked so normal, so familiar. "Hey, honey," she said with a smile. "How was work?" I didn't answer. I just stared at her, wondering how she could act so natural, so innocent, while lying to my face. For the next few days, I kept the knowledge to myself. I needed time to process, to figure out my next move. Every interaction with Patty felt like a test of my composure. When she kissed me goodbye before heading out for another shopping trip, I wanted to pull her aside and demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I waited until the next time she left. As soon as her car was out of the driveway, I opened the folder again and pored over the evidence. Each photo and receipt felt like another knife in my chest, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed to feel the pain, to let it remind me that this was real. The final straw came when I found a message on her laptop. I hadn't planned to snoop, but when I saw her laptop left open on the dining table, curiosity got the better of me. I clicked on her email and found a thread between her and Gareth. The subject line read, "Can't wait to see you again." I didn't have to read far to understand the nature of their relationship. The words were intimate, raw, dripping with the kind of passion that had been missing in our marriage for years. That night, I decided enough was enough. I wasn't going to sit silently in the shadow of her betrayal anymore. Patty came home later than usual that evening, her cheeks flushed and her smile a little too bright. She set her bag down by the door and greeted me with the same practiced warmth she'd been using for weeks. "Hey," she said, leaning in to kiss me. I turned my head, letting her kiss land on my cheek. It wasn't intentional, just instinct, but the flicker of confusion that passed over her face made my stomach tighten. "How was your day?" she asked, heading to the kitchen. I didn't answer. Instead, I stood by the living room table, staring at the folder of evidence I had placed there. I could feel the weight of the coming conversation pressing down on me, but there was no turning back now. "Patty," I called, my voice steady but sharp. She paused in the kitchen doorway, holding a glass of water. "Yeah, come here." She hesitated, sensing the seriousness in my tone. Slowly, she walked over, her eyes darting between me and the folder on the table. "What's going on?" I waited until she was close enough to see it. Then I opened the folder, flipping it to the first photo, her and Gareth outside the downtown hotel, holding hands. Her breath hitched audibly. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You tell me," I said coldly, flipping to the next photo. Then the next. And the next. Each one felt like a hammer strike in the suffocating silence of the room. She started, but no words followed. She reached for the photos, but I snatched them away, holding them just out of her reach. "Don't even try to deny it," I snapped. "I know everything, Patty. The hotels. The restaurants. Him." I spat the word like it was poison. "You've been using my money to fund your affair. Sneaking around, lying to my face. How long has this been going on?" "Weeks. Months." Tears welled up in her eyes, but they did nothing to soften the anger burning inside me. She sank into the chair across from me, her hands trembling as she covered her face. I didn't mean for this to happen," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Didn't mean for what to happen? To cheat on me? To humiliate me? Or to rob me blind while you played house with your trainer?" She flinched at my words, but I couldn't stop. The anger I'd been bottling up for weeks was pouring out, and I didn't care if it hurt. "Was it worth it?" I demanded, leaning over the table. Was he worth throwing everything away? She dropped her hands, her tear-streaked face twisted in guilt and desperation. "You don't understand, Stan. I was lonely. You were always at work, always too busy for me. Even when you were home, you weren't here. I needed someone to notice me, to care about me. I felt neglected in my marriage. Even when you were home, you preferred activities like playing golf with your friends over spending time with me. This made me feel lonely and isolated. Don't you dare put this on me, I growled. You had choices, Patty. You could have told me how you felt. You could have talked to me. But instead, you chose this. You chose to lie and sneak around and sleep with someone else. That's not on me. That's all on you. She broke down into sobs, her shoulders shaking as she tried to form words between gasps. I didn't mean to hurt you. He made me feel alive again. And I didn't know how to stop. The room felt stifling, her words like daggers twisting in my chest. I clenched my fists, trying to steady my breathing, trying not to let the hurt overwhelm me. I loved you, Patty, I said, my voice low but trembling with emotion. I trusted you. And this is what you do to me? To us. Her sobs grew louder, but I couldn't look at her anymore. I stood up, pacing the room as the weight of everything crashed down on me. I'm done, I finally said, stopping in my tracks. I'm done being your fool. Done being the guy you lie to and use. We're over. Her head shot up, her face a mask of panic. No. Stan, please, don't do this. We can fix this. I'll stop, I promise. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't leave me. Her pleas might have moved me once, but not anymore. The damage was done, and there was no repairing what she'd broken. You didn't leave me any choice, I said, grabbing the folder and walking toward the door. I'll have the divorce papers drawn up. Don't expect me to come back. She called after me, but I didn't stop. The sound of her voice faded as I stepped out into the night, slamming the door behind me. The cold air hit me like a slap, but it felt cleansing. As I walked to my car, I realized something. I'd spent so much time trying to piece together the truth, dreading what I might find. But now that I knew, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was free. Sitting in the car outside our home. No, my home. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The confrontation had left me raw, but strangely, there was a part of me that felt numb. I stared at the house, its windows glowing warmly in the darkness. It looked the same as it always had, but now it felt alien to me. The life Patty and I had built together, the late nights spent talking about the future, the vacations, the shared dreams, felt like a cruel joke in the wake of what I'd uncovered. I couldn't go back in there. Not now. Maybe not ever. I pulled out my phone and dialed my brother, Eric. He picked up on the second ring. Stan. It's late. Everything okay? I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. The silence must have worried him because his tone shifted. Stan. What's going on? I found out Patty's been cheating on me, I finally managed, my voice breaking. The line went quiet for a moment before Eric spoke again, his voice steady. Where are you? Do you need me to come over? No, I'm in my car. I just need to clear my head. You shouldn't be alone right now, he said firmly. Come over. Stay here tonight. We'll figure this out in the morning. I arrived at Eric's place about 20 minutes later, a small bag of essentials in hand. His wife, Melissa, greeted me with a warm hug and a cup of tea, her usual kindness mixed with quiet concern. I didn't say much as they ushered me into their guest room, but I felt grateful to have somewhere to go. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every detail of the last few weeks. The signs I'd ignored. The lies Patty had told. The way she'd cried during the confrontation, begging me not to leave. I wanted to hate her. In some ways, I did. But the memories of the woman I fell in love with, the woman who once made me believe in forever, complicated everything. Where had it gone wrong? Had I pushed her away with my long hours at work? Had I been too distant, too distracted? The guilt crept in like a shadow, whispering that maybe this was partly my fault. But then I thought of Gareth, of the hotel receipts, of the email she'd sent him, filled with words she hadn't said to me in years. No, this wasn't on me. I wasn't the one who cheated. I wasn't the one who lied. The next morning, Eric and Melissa tried to make me eat breakfast, but I could barely choke down a cup of coffee. So what's the plan? Eric asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. You going to stay here a few days? I shook my head. No. I need to take care of things. I'm filing for divorce today. Melissa winced. That fast? There's nothing left to think about, I said, the numbness from the night before giving way to a quiet resolve. She made her choice. Now I'm making mine. I spent the next few hours putting everything in motion. First, I called my financial advisor and froze our joint accounts. Patty wouldn't spend another dime of my money. Not on herself, and definitely not on Gareth. Then I called my lawyer, explaining the situation and setting up a meeting to file for divorce. Finally, I made one last call, to a property management company. The house we'd shared was mine before we got married, and I wasn't about to let it sit there filled with memories I couldn't stand to face. I decided to rent it out and start fresh somewhere else. By the end of the day, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. But there was a strange kind of relief in knowing that I was taking control, even if it meant tearing apart the life I'd spent years building. That evening, I returned to the house one last time to pack my things. Patty was there, sitting on the couch with red-rimmed eyes and a box of tissues in her lap. She looked up when I walked in, her face lighting up with a flicker of hope. "Stan," she said softly, standing as I entered. "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "I'm not here to talk. I'm just getting my stuff." She followed me to the bedroom, hovering in the doorway as I packed a suitcase. "Stan, please," she said. "Can't we just talk? I know I screwed up, but I love you. I don't want to lose you." Her words might have been convincing if I didn't know the truth. If I didn't know about the messages, the hotels, the way she smiled at him in those photos. "I already lost you, Patty," I said without looking at her. "The moment you decided to sleep with him, we were done." She burst into tears, but I didn't stop packing. My heart ached, but I forced myself to stay strong. This wasn't just about what she'd done, it was about what I needed. And I needed to move on. When I finally left, I didn't look back. The house, once a symbol of our life together, was just another building now. As I drove away, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. The betrayal, the loss, the uncertainty of the future. But beneath it all, there was a spark of something else. Freedom, maybe. Or the faintest glimmer of hope. The first few weeks after leaving Patty were some of the hardest of my life. There's no manual for what to do when your world falls apart, and the emotions came in waves. Anger, sadness, regret, and occasionally, a strange sense of relief. I moved into a high-rise apartment downtown, a place close to my office and far from the memories of the life I had left behind. It wasn't home yet, but it was mine. The space was modern, sleek, and minimal. Nothing like the house I'd shared with Patty, which now felt like a relic of a life that didn't belong to me anymore. Filing for divorce was a straightforward process, thanks to my lawyer. The evidence from the private investigator had been more than enough to shut down any arguments from Patty's side. Still, seeing her name on the paperwork felt like a knife to the chest. It made everything real in a way I wasn't entirely prepared for. She tried reaching out a few times. Calls, texts, even a letter left at my office. At first, I ignored her. I couldn't bring myself to hear her voice, not after everything she'd done. But one night, after too many drinks and too little sleep, I read her letter. The words were a tangled mess of apologies and excuses. She blamed loneliness, my long hours at work, and the growing distance between us. She admitted to using my money to fund her time with Gareth but claimed she'd felt trapped. Too ashamed to stop and too scared to tell me the truth. "I never stopped loving you," she wrote. "I just didn't know how to reach you anymore." For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. Had I been too distant? Too caught up in my career to see what was happening in my own marriage? But then I thought about the lies, the empty shopping bags, the nights I'd spent waiting for her to come home while she was out with someone else. Whatever my flaws were, they didn't justify what she'd done. Her betrayal was her choice, not mine. I burned the letter in the sink that night, watching the flames consume her words until nothing remained but ash. I threw myself into work, using the long hours to fill the void Patty had left behind. I even started therapy, something I never thought I'd do. Talking to a stranger about my pain felt strange at first, but it helped. Slowly, I began to let go of the anger and resentment that had been eating away at me. One afternoon, I found myself walking through a park near my apartment. The air was crisp, the trees shedding their last leaves of the season. As I sat on a bench watching the world go by, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad or bitter, either. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt okay. The memories of Patty still lingered, but they didn't control me anymore. She was part of my past, but that's where she belonged. My future was mine to shape, free of her lies and the weight of her betrayal. The divorce was finalized a few weeks later. I celebrated by taking myself out to dinner, ordering a steak and a bottle of wine I didn't have to share. It felt like a small victory, a moment of closure and self-acknowledgement. I looked tired, sure, but there was something else in my eyes I hadn't seen in a long time: hope. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this: I'll be okay. Maybe I'll fall in love again someday. Maybe I won't. Either way, I'll keep moving forward. Because for the first time in years, I'm not living in someone else's shadow. I'm living for me. Do you think I did the right thing by breaking up with Patty? Let me know in the comments below this video.